So what is going on with Redfall? If you've been on the internet over the past 24 hours, you likely saw at least some of the discourse on Redfall and really what it means for Xbox overall, and even how it seems like hopes for Starfield are plummeting by the minute due to the recent Redfall launch. Just yesterday, not only Redfall reviews, but the game itself dropped. Which, right off the bat, both of those coming at the same time is a problem on its own, and we're definitely going to be talking about that. But Redfall is shaping up to be a disastrous launch for Xbox and Bethesda overall, leading many fans to be fed up with the company to the point of calling for the head of Xbox to step down, and even further being concerned about what is going to happen with Starfield. So let's talk about all that. So though this is not going to be my full-scale Redfall review, I have been playing the game. I was invited to that hands-on event in March, and I did receive a review code late Saturday. So I am able to bring you the perspective of not only a bunch of other reviews, but also my own experience and thoughts when playing the game for myself. And yes, for this video I went through and read a bunch of the Redfall reviews so we could get a better idea of the overall thoughts and perception on the game, and well, they're bad. And even as just a succinct example of how bad this actually is, the game currently has a 65 on OpenCritic. Which, okay, not the best, but even worse is that only 25% of critics recommend you play this game, aka the vast majority are literally saying just don't bother. Which marks this as not only the worst reviewed arcane game of all time, but also quite literally the worst reviewed first-party Xbox game of this console generation. Even if you're personally enjoying the game, looking at Xbox overall, this is bad, a definite low point for what has historically been one of the best reviewed game developers with Arcane. One of the big talking points leading up to the launch of Redfall was the always online requirement, featuring de novo DRM on PC and the delaying of the 60 FPS performance mode on consoles. Now what's funny is, despite these being some of the biggest talking points before release, in the actual reviews these barely come up. Although yes, Redfall does have its fair share of bugs and performance issues, with frame drops being quite common on some PCs, a lot of people also didn't really have problems on this front. For me personally, I was able to play the game quite comfortably, rarely dropping FPS, and it seemed like for consoles it held 30 FPS surprisingly well. And although bugs were definitely a bigger issue at times as they could impact progress, beyond lag and bugs, what ended up being the bigger talking point with Redfall in the reviews is just this game isn't that good. This is not a Jedi Survivor situation where it's a good game plagued with bugs. Instead, it seems like based on these reviews, Redfall is actually a mediocre to bad game that also happens to have some bugs and lag issues. The biggest issues cited with Redfall were just it's a generic game that lacked cohesion. Many of the environments lacked that signature arcane intricacy. There was barely any NPC interaction.
Goodbye.
And the story itself is literally told through slideshows, with comparisons to Fallout 76 coming out, as this is a game without dialogue choices and mostly told through notes and finding ghosts that also released in a relatively buggy state, just like Fallout 76. Reviewers described how the loot system felt underbaked and largely pointless, and basically every quest is going to be some rendition of a fetch quest until you eventually get to a boss fight. Almost nothing around the game received praise, even the good parts were largely just the mediocre parts of Redfall, with reviewers describing things like decent weapon variety, pretty good sound effects, interesting environmental storytelling from time to time, and how the co-op gameplay did feel pretty fun. But beyond that, when it comes to the actual gameplay, the enemy AI was described as dumb to the point where trying to do anything other than running and gunning was pretty much just pointless, as well as the game consistently felt either too easy or too hard and rarely found that difficulty sweet spot. Overall for me, I just found Redfall to not be all that interesting. The story never really sucked me in, the enemies had poor AI, and it's mostly just doing open world things and clearing out some enemies from areas, and there are a lot of other games that do that a lot better than this one. But at the same time, I definitely didn't feel it was as bad of an experience as some of the other reviewers made it out to be. It's definitely not a great game, but I also didn't feel like it was a horrible game or unplayable. But everyone does not agree with my take there, as I think what has been one of the most telling parts to come out from some of these recent reviews was how several reviews recommended not playing Redfall even if you already own Game Pass. If you already have Game Pass, you could basically play the game for free, but many reviews said don't bother. Although personally, I largely disagree with that sentiment. I think if you do have Game Pass, I would recommend giving the game a try. Despite its flaws, I think co-op with a couple of friends, maybe throw in a couple of beers on top, and you have yourself a good few hours of fun. And although I'm mostly focusing on reviews for media here, this negative sentiment is pretty much just unparalleled by the community. The Steam reviews for this game are overwhelmingly negative, with just about 20 to 30% being positive, when you can find tons of posts online being very negative and really saying this game is an embarrassment overall for Xbox. Which really makes you wonder what this game looked like before the latest delay. If you don't remember, this game was actually delayed about a year ago. Definitely seems like this game would have benefited from another delay, although honestly, I'm not sure that would have even saved it. Redfall is a game with some fundamental and just overarching design issues, and I'm not sure more time in the oven, unless it was a lot more time, would have helped fix those. But unfortunately, when it comes to Redfall, it's the outside factors that I think really serve to hurt it even more, and make what would otherwise be a disappointing game in a vacuum a much larger overall problem for Xbox when you consider the context. One of the first things that needs to be talked about is this review situation. Honestly, I think this is one of the worst parts of Redfall overall. It seems like, according at least to several of the reviews I listened to or read, that Bethesda and Xbox started sending out review codes for Redfall on Friday the 28th. I personally received my code late Saturday on the 29th. So on one hand, that means you literally only had the weekend to review the game. You could start on Friday and finish on Monday, but sorry reviewers, you have to do the bulk of your work over the weekend if you want a review out by the embargo time, which is likely why several reviewers from major outlets like IGN did not publish finished reviews yesterday. And this also being despite the fact that Redfall is only about 15 hours in length. It's probably just a case of these reviewers not wanting to work all weekend to review this, and frankly, I can't blame them. Although, honestly, making reviewers' lives a bit difficult is not even all that uncommon. What makes this even worse again is the review embargo lifted at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Do you know what time Redfall released to the world? 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, meaning that Bethesda and Xbox not only gave people only one real business day to review the game, but they also made sure much of the community would already be playing the game by the time those reviews dropped, likely anticipating that the review scores would be bad. To me, this is a simple case of Xbox and Bethesda trying to make sure you are a less informed consumer. It really feels like this was just a case of you not reading reviews, and instead you would just jump onto Game Pass immediately and jump into the game and not hear the opinions of others. Rather than trying to own up to the type of game Redfall would end up becoming, it seems like they really tried to hide it as much as possible, which is not a good thing. And although Bethesda in the past definitely has had a short window from review release to game release, Redfall was the shortest ever, especially for modern games. Most of the other games from Bethesda at least had a couple of days between the reviews and the game release. Deathloop being one of the shortest over the past couple of years, with it just getting a 12-hour window, but still that's way better than Redfall, which had a 0-hour window. The reviews and the game came out at the exact same time. And what exaggerates this even a bit more is Xbox and Bethesda really could have used a win here. We just got the news that the planned Microsoft purchase of Activision Blizzard is being blocked. And there is this general sentiment in the community of wanting more. Xbox needs more games, and based off the reviews, it doesn't really seem like Redfall is going to be that solution for a lot of players. And this failure to deliver on quality games on a consistent or even somewhat consistent basis has led to many people pointing the crosshairs at the head of Xbox, that with Phil Spencer, mentioning how, despite him being the savior of Xbox in the past, it may be approaching the time to move on from him. I don't necessarily share that sentiment, but you're definitely seeing it pop up in the community quite frequently after this Redfall launch. And one of the other fronts this narrative has gone down is concerns for Starfield. Following the release of Redfall, there's been a lot of doom and gloom posting around the future of Xbox overall. What seems to be happening is, as more and more people grow frustrated with Xbox, more stakes are being put on Starfield. Starfield is being viewed as the game that needs to prop up Xbox and really be a system seller for this year and years going forward. And although I definitely do understand that perspective, why the stakes for Starfield have been rising, the narrative has also expanded and really grown into concerns for Starfield and its development. There are a ton of users who, following the launch of Redfall, now have much less faith in Starfield, or even others who strongly feel the Redfall launch will lead to another Starfield delay. And I feel like this narrative is both unfounded but also understandable. Over the past couple of years, Starfield and Redfall have been closely attached. They were delayed in the same tweet. Xbox has been focusing on only showing near games, so lots of the Bethesda marketing has really just been Starfield and Redfall, and I think this has led to many fans associating the two of them, despite the fact that, of course, Redfall and Starfield are being developed by two completely separate teams. Redfall is an Arcane Studios title, while Starfield is a Bethesda Game Studios title. And I mean, yeah, on one front, both of these games are being published by Bethesda Softworks, but the actual game development is being handled by completely separate companies with completely different leadership. If their concerns were on the marketing side, which is often handled by the publisher, I would get that. Like even just in an example, the Redfall review situation. That shady review embargo definitely made me concerned for Starfield, because it's going to likely be the same exact people and same company handling the reviews for Starfield. With as big of a game as Starfield is set to be, I really hope you have more than just a couple of days to review it, and even further, I hope that the reviews go up in advance of the release of the game. But when it comes to the actual game and its development, I don't think the Redfall launch has much impact on Starfield at all. And for me personally, I don't feel more concerned about Starfield due to Redfall, and I don't think you should either. Perhaps the negative Redfall reception leads to Starfield getting delayed a couple of months to November. I think this can make sense if they need some extra polish time because they really need to nail the game. Otherwise, if you weren't concerned about Starfield before, I don't think you should be concerned about it now. The stakes are certainly higher when it comes to the Xbox fan loyalty and even Game Pass ongoing subscriptions, but on the development side, I think Starfield is going to be pretty isolated from Redfall. And honestly, for me personally, Bethesda Game Studios games don't even need to be all that great. If Starfield ends up getting a 70 on Metacritic, but does maintain an extensive modding scene and some Bethesda open world magic, I'll be pretty happy. I don't need Starfield to be the game of the year to be fulfilled by this one. And that's an opinion I've had for a while. I mean, if I look back at Fallout 4, I have had hundreds, if not thousands of hours of enjoyment with what is otherwise a pretty mediocre game. With that said, at the same time, the Redfall situation definitely marks a low point for Bethesda and Xbox. Although with Naughty 3 just a bit over a month away, hope is still there for a course correction, and if Starfield delivers, we'll probably forget about all of this in just a couple of months' time. Which, speaking of, did you know that Bethesda Game Studios actually has a ton more slated to release in 2023? Check out this video to learn about their fairly stacked calendar going forward.